answer was given, and they subsequently left the office.
But at least at that conversation, the surviving diver was revealed.
Yes.
Mr. Bodam.
Yes.
Well, we got through that already, say didn't. And then what happened after that? They were just,
That was it, they left.
Right. And when they left, all you knew is that there was all of this information, this drawing on the board and all of that. A man was recovered, rescued, and that's it. That's all you knew.
Yes.
And you remained silent throughout all of this, apart from asking those two questions about the habitat and the plug.
I was no longer in their presence.
No, while you were in their presence, those are the only two questions you asked.
At that time, yes, no answer was given for those questions, and they left.
You and tell them, I feel a man could be in the pipe, you know. Let's do up an assessment for the pipe.
No, I did not.
Why not?
As I said earlier, I entered into an active emergency management system. PARIA's team would have been functioning. The incident command team, LMCS, may have had an emergency response plan active. I do not know who PARIA was in communication with, what resources they had available, and what was being done or conducted at that time.
Right.
So when they came into the room and they asked those questions, or not even asked the questions, they showed me to give me an idea of what was transpiring, and I made my comment. That did not go any further. They left. So there wasn't a conversation.
So they showed you the stuff because you have expertise to bring.
So
did you tell them you had Mitchell on site to conduct the dive?
Yes, all that was communicated on my arrival in terms of what resources was available at that time when I arrived. So that's why I got the information from Mitchell when they arrived.
Right.
I called OTSL to find out where they were, and I would have communicated that.
Right. And the assistance you brought through Mitchell, at that stage, your equipment that you brought, it was intended for a seabed dive or a pipe dive also?
To effect a dive, it doesn't matter. To effect a dive.
It could be both?
Yes.
Right. When you're up in that room upstairs in the ICT, you didn't indicate that you had equipment standing by to do a dive into the pipe also?
No. There was no conversation to effect a dive or request to effect any dive or anything so wrong than diving.
Right.
So
when this, according to you, persons left the ICT, what time you left the ICT room after having arrived around 9:30?
No, and that was not the ICT room.
Well, the room...
This is a room separate and apart from incident command.
Right.
So they came into a room where I was.
Right.
I do not even know what office that was.
Right.
So this was a brief conversation and they left.
And they left you. But
Yes.
that room had the whiteboard.
It had a whiteboard.
A whiteboard with
yes.
the drawing on it.
Yes.
Right. They left there and left you there.
Yes.
Right. That was around what time?
That would be after 9:30.
Right. And you remained there by yourself for how long?
Yes, Mr. Fleming would have been there. I would have walked out in the hall, but that's the area I was stationed.
Yeah, for how long? Until what time?
Until would be the 12:15, when they would have had the briefing in the lobby, where a request was made for diver intervention.
So that would have been about 2.5 hours later.
Yes.
When was this request made about diving to remove the blockage in the pipeline?
12:15, approximately.
And you were privy to that? You were present for that?
Yes.
Right. When they make this request, who they made it of?
They made the request of the Coast Guard. They declined.
No, just now, in your presence?
Yes.
Right.
Right. So it was a briefing in the lobby area of that building.
Yes.
Right. He gave a briefing of
who?
Mr. Piper,
right,
of what the camera would have encountered.
Yeah.
Right. And then he made a request for intervention. The initial request was made of the Coast Guard.
Yes.
To remove the blockage.
Right.
They declined.
Yes.
Then he asked me.
He asked you
if I could send my divers
into
the pipeline.
For what purpose?
To remove the blockage, which would have been a cylinder, what the camera would have encountered.
Why would, and you declined that also?
No.
Well, you send the men in?
No, I had no medicine, so I indicated that I have no divers. And I asked questions in
No,
terms
but you
of,
had control over Mitchell divers.
which I explained later on. So
Yes.
I told him, because it was a direct question, if I can send my divers.
Yes.
So just for it not to be misunderstood, I have no divers.
Right.
Mitchell's and OTSL have divers, have a
Right.
dive team and a dive supervisor.
Right.
What I could have done is make a request through them.
To
So I
dive.
made that clear.
Right.
Yes.
12:15.
Yes.
You and saying, but why are we so obsessed with this pipeline?
No, by that time we would have known, because they would have heard of the conversation.
Which
By this
conversation?
12:15, this is after Mr. Budram would have been recovered.
I know,
So they're
long. Mr.
focusing-
Budram come
Exactly.
recovered 5:30, yeah?
Right, so they, in their communication at that briefing, they're looking at going into the pipeline. They have the information that it's possible that men are in the pipeline. So at 12:15, this conversation is to effect a dive into the pipeline.
To remove the tanks,
Yes,
to get clearance to do a rescue.
yes.
Right. So at 9:30, that conversation didn't take place.
No,
Well, I am putting to you it did. In fact, I'm putting to you that you were immediately and entering the building, taken to the whiteboard. You were told that Budram was recovered. I'm putting that to you.
Is
Yes.
this at 9:30?
Yes, and-
Can I understand, is this at 9:30?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So 9:30 or thereabouts?
At 9:30 thereabouts.
Is this when he had the meeting with...
Upstairs.
Upstairs
In the
with
room.
Mr. Way?
Yes,
Right.
sir.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
And you're...
Yeah, I'm putting that he was informed that the men were missing, that
yeah.
Budram had been taken out of the pipe, was rescued out of the pipe.
I
I'm
disagree.
putting that to you. Right.
He was
So-
rescued.
Yeah.
Well,
I know.
sorry. Oh,
Yeah, well, yeah, I know. Get that already. I don't want to cover ground twice. So we're now at 12:15.
yes.
So the request was made of Mitchell through you,
Yes.
through the supervisor. What did they say about going in to remove the arm?
No, after reviewing the footage, they declined.
Right.
So that
You-
would have been,
You have 25 years experience in diving at that stage.
yes.
You had any difficulty with that declining?
No,
Right. You think it was a reasonable position?
yes.
Yes. You had any difficulty with the request to clear the line before going in further? To clear the obstacle before sending in divers?
No,
Further?
he was sending divers in to
To clear the,
the...
yes, thank you, sir. Thanks. You had any difficulty with they sending divers in to clear the obstacle to effect the rescue?
This is after reviewing the video footage?
Yeah.
Yes.
What was the difficulty?
As I would have indicated earlier, in terms of the size of the pipeline, how you accessing the pipeline, the equipment that would have been required to effect the dive, what position the diver would have been in, right? How do you rescue, your rescue plan in terms of...
Right. Yeah, yeah,
Yes.
we got all that before. Yeah, I don't mean to cut you off. I mean we got that before. I don't want to spend time. I'm also instructed that you weren't just parked aside and put on hold. You were being consulted at different stages for your advice and assistance. Is that not so?
No.
So after 12:15, what happened?
No,
to
sorry, after 12:15,
Yeah.
oh no,
No, between you arriving
yes,
and the declining to send men
Yes.
into the pipe to clear, you're being consulted at different points for your input and assistance.
no,
So after 9:30 thereabouts, the next time you got engaged is 12:15 thereabouts in the lobby meeting.
yes, for our intervention.
After you declined, well, through Mitchell declining through you, What was your participation thereafter?
A request was made for chamber support. For recompression chamber support for Mr.
All right. That
Yes.
is, yeah.
No,
I mean, apart from, okay, go ahead.
So, and that would have occurred at the time when we were reviewing the video footage at berth 6. So my focus would have transitioned from facilitating that request in terms of the treatment for Mr. Budram,
Yes.
which would have been mobilizing our chamber, the chamber support.
Right. That is Mr. Bud. Right.
So that's my involvement. So again, this is within the same timeline of having the request to go to berth 6 to review the video with Mitchells and OTSL. The other request at that time would have been for a treatment for Mr. Budram.
So two questions. I got all of that.
Yes.
Commendable. You had 25 years diving experience. You were in charge of the diving wing of Heritage, right? If I could call it a diving
Yes.
wing. PARIA is a sister company. And as a
Yes.
sister under one kind of umbrella. You went there in an emergency to assist. Bringing your experience to bear, you didn't ask these men, when we dive in, when we looking for this man,
No.
you just sat there waiting to be questioned.
No.
You didn't say, I have the command of Mitchell's diving. I could put 5 men in the water within the next half an hour. Can I do that?
No, sir, that's not how it works.
Oh, that's not how it works.
No, sir.
What do you mean by that's not how it works?
So it's a emergency response system that has been activated. Everybody have roles and responsibilities. I cannot arrive on location. There was no directive of, okay, you are here, you and your team take command of anything. The operation was ongoing. Incident command team, which is, I am unaware of what resources, other resources, and what was actually taking place at berth 6 on LMCS badge, what resources LMCS had, what communication was taking place between LMCS and PARIA, or any other external resources. I was sent there to support, if required. So that's saying I am there in the system. I am not there like I am at the commission today. I am not here to do as I please or what I think. I am under the command of...
The chairman?
Yes.
Yes.
That is not just you either, right?
Mr. Ramada. Yeah. Right. So you got, I like that. You got into a command system that was
Yes.
already activated.
Yes.
That is good. But dealing with the human side of you now.
Yes.
And taking for, well, I'm doing this as a risk. Taking us about what Mr. Ramadan say about a brotherhood of divers.
Yes.
You know divers are missing.
Yes.
Notwithstanding the activation of this system, I understand from examination earlier in the commission by Commissioner Wilson about a command system and
Yes.
a structure. And the human side of you now.
Yes.
I know a diver is also human, but I mean the human side of you.
Yes.
And saying, well, men missing, I mean, I want to dive, what are you doing?
Yes, I would say things to myself.
No, not you to you. Not you to you. Because I say some things to myself in this commission.
No, so
But you understand what I'm saying?
yes.
And you did nothing.
Yes.
Even when, at least the one request you admitted to so far was made of you, you didn't do it. To do the assessment.
Yes.
The dive assessment. To rescue men. Isn't that so?
No.
You did the assessment? You did nothing pursuant to a request to do an assessment to dive, not for gold, to dive to rescue men. Isn't that so?
No, that wasn't. I'll say it was not concluded. It's not clear cut as into a request was made to do a rescue dive, and I said I'm not going to do a risk assessment for a rescue dive. It was a conversation. Subsequently, we left to go upstairs.
But you give advice at some point that a dive is not advisable.
It would not have been any form of advice, would have been communication from,
Well,
yes.
Suggestion.
So yes.
You suggested that a dive was not advisable
Yes, I can say that.
because it was too risky.
Yes.
And that was the dive into the pipe. Or all dives.
Well, no, this is a 12:15 conversation. So,
Yeah.
yes, so in terms of diver intervention, this would have been the conversation after the review of the video footage, after consultation with Mitchell's and OTSL dive supervisors, that would have been communicated to ICT.
And your professional opinion, you agreed with the
Yes.
dive supervisor that it's too risky.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Seals.
You have some questions? Yes, I do have a few questions, just if you can help me, please. First of all, can I, in order to try and pin down the time when you first arrived at PARIA,
Yes.
and what happened thereafter, can I ask that put up is page 1573, which is the Supplemental Core Bundle, Volume 2, which contains the actions as recorded by PARIA's scribe at the scene,
Yes.
at the IMT, right, or the I forget what it's called, the command center, right? The person who's scribing as events take place. And what we can see is, if you go, please, to the next page, 2141. Do you see there's an entry there? Roll up, please, 2141. I'm afraid the timing of this is not always chronological, but 2141. Do you see it? Yes, there we are. Do you see, thank you, you can see at 2106, there's a discussion with Kazim Ali Sr., and then there's information from Mr. Kazim Ali Sr., and then at 2141, the next entry, it says, discussions with heritage personnel. Do you see that line?
Yes.
Right, that's at 2141, do you see?
Yes.
Right, now, you told us that between 2130 and 2400 hours, there were various personnel in and out of the meetings, in and out of the office, but at around 2130, you had a meeting which involved a number of the personnel at PARIA, correct?
Yes.
Right. And that's the meeting that has been put to you by Mr. Peterson and others. And I just want to try and identify the timing of this, because if this document drafted by PARIA is accurate,
yes,
the discussion is taking place at 2141. Do you see?
Yes.
Right. So do you think that might be right when you were in this meeting with these people from PARIA? You said 2130.
Yes.
This is 2141.
Possibly.
Right. We can see that the next thing that happens at 2143 is that someone's trying to contact the hospital in order to try and make arrangements to speak to Mr. Boudram.
Yes.
Now, were you present in the meeting where Mr. Boudram spoke to PARIA?
No, I wasn't in the meeting.
You weren't in that meeting?
No.
Right. So whatever the time was that you were in the meeting, it's cut off by what we know from other evidence. Mr. Boudram was speaking to members of the team in the incident room. And we know that to be shortly before 10 o'clock. So it's around 2141, there or thereabouts, if their note is accurate.
Yes.
Now, in that meeting at that time, is it the case that you had already spoken with Mr. Fleming Holder?
Yes.
And at 21:41, if that's the right time, you're in this meeting, you're now explaining, or it's being explained to you what did or didn't happen. There's a dispute, I appreciate, between what's being suggested and what you put in your statement, all right?
Yes.
And I'm not really, for the moment, for the purposes of my questions, interested in that dispute. What I'm interested to know is this: whether it is right or wrong that you were told certain things or not told certain things. On any view, the first time you knew anything about the detail of this event, this incident, was at the earliest possible time would have been at 2100 hours,
yes,
when you first arrived at the scene and saw Mr. Fleming Holder.
Yes.
Am I right about that?
Yes.
Right. So, whatever the position, whatever you've been told, whatever you weren't told or were told, it is not suggested that you knew anything other than the very basic fact that there was an emergency to which you were required to attend, yes?
Yes.
Until 2100 hours.
Yes.
All right. At 2100 hours, when you were being told something, whatever it was, were you, and I will ask you to reflect on this, please, were you told then how long it had been since Mr. Boudram had emerged from the pipe?
No.
Think about it, please. It's quite important, this, all right? Do you think there's even the possibility that you were told how long it had been since Mr. Boudram had emerged from the pipe?
No.
Would you regard that as an important fact to be told?
Yes.
You told Mr. Peterson that you were asked at an early stage, say early, sometime after 2100 hours, about a risk assessment.
Yes.
Right. First of all, were you asked if you were capable of preparing a risk assessment?
No.
Were you asked to carry out a risk assessment?
No.
What was it that you were asked about a risk assessment?
If I had a diving risk assessment?
Did you have one? You were asked that, were you?
Yes.
Right. And did you?
Well, again, it would not be specific because the risk assessment is site-specific.
Site-specific.
For the
And you see,
task.
Mr. Peterson's saying, not unreasonably, if that is the case, if a risk assessment is site-specific, wouldn't that lead you inevitably to be asking questions?
Yes. And there was no information available.
Right.
So that's why nothing
well,
ever...
let's take it one step at a time. See, the first question is, did you ask the questions? Because I rather understood your answer to Mr. Peterson was that you didn't.
No.
Right. So, do you recognize now that perhaps you should have?
Yes.
Right. So you should have, what you're saying is, you didn't ask the questions, but perhaps you should have done.
Yes, I should have interrogated.
Right. Because that, once you started asking those questions, you would presumably be given the answers if they knew them.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So that's with Mr. Fleming Holder, all right?
Yes.
And then after that, about a half an hour later, 41 minutes later, if that record is correct, you're now in a meeting with a number of others. Yes, you've told us, Mr. Way,
Yes.
Mr. Piper, and others, yes? And in that meeting, were you asked anything about a risk assessment in
No.
that meeting?
No.
Bearing in mind that we're now pushing 10 o'clock, knowing what you know now, that Mr. Boudram emerged from the pipe at about 5:45, something like that, all right? what was the likelihood of anybody being alive in your mind at 10 o'clock?
Highly unlikely.
Were you willing to risk either your own life or anybody else's in effecting a rescue of anybody who was highly unlikely to be alive?
As a diver, my own.
I'm sorry?
As a diver, my own.
I'm sorry, just didn't catch
Right.
it.
So the question you asked was if I would have been willing to risk my life
Yes.
or anybody else's.
Yes. Bearing in mind, we're now, 4 plus hours after Mr. Boudram has come out of the pipe and nearly 7 hours after the incident.
Yes.
Would you be willing to risk yourself or others to effect a rescue of somebody who you think highly unlikely to be alive?
No.
You were asked a little about the time that it took between your being first alerted to this just before, I think, 6 o'clock. Forgive me, no, I think it was just before 5 o'clock. Yes, literally minutes before 5 o'clock, when you were first told about the incident and asked to attend. Do you remember?
Yes.
So let's, for the sake of a couple of minutes, call it 5 o'clock, all right? So at 5 o'clock you first learned of this and you were asked to attend. You told us you did the best you could to speed yourself up to get there. You realised it was an emergency. But between that time and arriving at the PARIA site, you told us you went first of all to Heritage, and I asked you about how far it was and so on. So just so that I understand this, please, was there anything to prevent you being informed en route what the issues were and what might be done to effect a rescue? I mean, were you on the phone, for example? Were you available on the telephone?
I had my phone, but I was not in communication with anyone from PARIA.
No, I appreciate that there's no evidence to suggest that you did actually speak to anybody at PARIA, but I simply want to know whether or not you were available to be called by PARIA or anyone else.
Yes.
And had you been called, would you have been in a position to have provided them with such expertise or knowledge as you had?
Yes.
But that didn't happen.
No.
So the hours of delay between, if that's the right expression, between your first being alerted and arrival at PARIA would not have prevented them from speaking to you if they had wished to do so.
It would not have.
All right. Thank you. That's quite a lot. So if anybody wants to ask any questions, in particular Mr. Peterson. Yes, of course.
Following from that last question, nothing prevented Mitchell, your supervisor, Mr. Fortune, Heritage, anybody calling you. Anything prevented you as a human being from volunteering, knowing that there's a diving emergency and you have 25 years experience? Phone calls work both ways, unless your phone was on one way.
Sir, in my opinion, the emergency was being managed by the resources available. So
I know I get that.
Yeah, so who
I am dealing with the human side of you, a diver, brother diver's missing. Nobody ain't calling you according to your evidence. You must say, for example, if I hear Mr. Mutu missing, nobody had to call me. I call in around everybody I know who could dive, who could fly, who could do whatever. Let's look for Jason. You didn't do any of that.
So who was I to call? That's the question.
Mr. Fortune, to say, hey, you only tell me activate your supervisor. Hey, you only tell me activate so and so and so. I have a boss man at HSA man called Mr. Holder. What all of them doing? Anybody? What we doing? Who missing? How many men missing? Divers missing? Brothers missing? Anything like that?
No.
On reflection, you should have done that, right? Come on. On reflection as a human diver.
So knowing the little that I know now, yes.
The little you know?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave that there, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Ramadan.
Questions, and I'm very grateful to Mr. Peterson's cross-examination. So, Mr. Seals, Did it ever come to your attention that the survivor, Mr. Budram, had given an indication as to how deep into the pipe he would have been?
No.
You appreciate the pipe at its full length was like quarter mile, correct?
Yes.
You knew that
It's
from
1200.
before?
Yes.
That is quite intimidating a distance, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So in answer to Mr. Peterson, when you spoke about the difficulties, you appreciate if it was 1,000 feet in, that would be very difficult, correct?
Yes.
But if it was less, it would be less difficult.
Yes.
And if it was far less, for instance, less than 150, maybe 160 feet, that is doable with all of the difficulties that would have been identified, correct?
Less difficult.
Thank you. And doable. And doable.
Yes.
Thank you. Most grateful to you, sir.
I think Mr. Wilson had some questions, and then I'll come back to council.
Morning again, Mr. Seals. I just have 3 direct questions. So I heard that your official title in Heritage is Dive Supervisor and Client Representative.
Yeah.
And Client Representative.
Yes.
Have you had any formal training to be a client representative?
Yes.
From which institution?
JFD.
Sorry?
JFD, James Special Division.
GMB, okay, yes. Great. So you...
Now move the microphone the other way, to the right, okay?
All right. Are you aware of your obligations as a client representative under your training or industry best practice as you quoted?
Yes.
Okay. I'll go here. Just a slightly different question to the room. I heard you mention your awareness that an ICT was stood up, but and hopefully I'm not repeating the question, but when you arrived at PARIA, what upon your arrival indicated that an ICT was stood up and an incident was being managed? What?
I would have taken it for granted that it's industry best practice. So
Okay.
when I was taken upstairs and introduced to the personnel, I wasn't formally introduced identifying each individual's role, but it was assumed.
So you only identified, just to be clear, you only felt like an incident was being managed when it was taken upstairs?
Yes.
And that's when you first became aware that an ICT is stood up
Yes.
and an incident is being managed. Being aware of your roles, responsibilities, and obligations as a client representative, not as a dive supervisor, I don't know, well, I'm going to ask how much experience you've had in terms of managing an emergency response.
None.
Any training or awareness, not even diving related, but any other sort of training or familiarization courses?
No.
All right. And I think what came out into the room, but I'd also like to test with you. At any point in time, did you feel, as a client representative, that you felt that you could have injected yourself into the IMT, given that you are a subject matter expert?
No.
No.
Based on my assumptions of, again, I didn't know what resources were available to PARIA's team, who they were in communication with, and what LMCS had in place.
I understand that, but it would be more the injection of your expertise into the conversations. That what I'm asking is not your awareness. Your awareness of those resources would come after I offer for your consideration. That would come after you inject yourself into the ICT conversations and stuff. Yeah. All right. My third question would be around the decompression chamber.
Yes.
I heard that a request was made for that, but also I heard that the decompression chamber was no longer required. Who indicated that chamber no longer required?
I would have been informed through heritage personnel, that via the doctor, so it was a communication.
Okay, so there was a doctor or Hyperberg doctor
Yes.
involved in that decision.
Yes, so
That
again-
decision didn't come from you.
No.
Okay, great. So, and that doctor was part of Heritage's emergency response, if you're aware.
No, I'm unaware. So again, I was just facilitating requests. So communication and requests came from individuals through
Understood.
Heritage. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Maharaj.
Yeah. I just have a few questions. In answer to Mr. Peterson, when he asked you, well, why you didn't offer some advice, some men are missing, men need to be rescued, you said you were aware that the ICT was activated,
Yes.
and therefore you couldn't do that. Right? You remember you
Yes.
said words to that effect? If you were invited by the ICT to give the ICT advice on rescue efforts for these men, would you have done that?
Yes, but it would have required going to the site.
It was required?
Going to the site and being more informed and involved.
Yes. And if you were permitted to do all of that by the ICT, would you have been prepared to do that?
Yes.
And you would have been able to answer some of the questions that were asked of you today as to the considerations in having a rescue plan for that particular situation on that day.
Yes.
But you were never asked to do that.
No.
As a matter of fact, according to paragraph 5 of your affidavit, you were asked specifically to mobilize Mitchell's Professional Diving Services Company Limited to report to and provide support if required at PARIA Trading Company Limited.
Yes.
And you kept to your instructions, what you were instructed to do.
Yes.
That's all for this witness.
Yes, thank you. Right, we'll take lunch and resume at 2:30, please. To go, Mr. Seals, forgive me. It's been a long morning, so forgive me. Thank you very much for coming. Your evidence is appreciated, as it is with all witnesses here. You're now free to go, and you can stay or leave as you please, all right? But thank you very much. Thank you. All right, yes, we'll rise now, and we'll resume at 2:30, please, 2:30.